Andrew. Andy.
Thank you. I'd like to take a slightly different tack and looking more at the links between the index and budget transparency and wider public finance management reform agendas, budget reform agendas. And again, I think the first thing to say here is that it amazes me actually how the survey has had an impact on the country, in the countries where I've been working, in terms of people knowing about it, people thinking about how to improve their scores, and this was obviously before the results of the current survey came out. So I think that's a tremendous achievement. And I think the other thing that is impressive is the independence of the survey, and I think one can perhaps contrast it a little with the public expenditure and financial accountability initiative from the donors, where there seems to have been certain capture and a lack of consistency between the assessments that are made, and also linking of them to conditionalities, which has sometimes distorted the environment in which they have been undertaken. So I think it's a tremendously positive initiative. I think looking at it from another side, I mean, looking at some of the countries that I know quite well, and then looking at their reports in the most recent report, it did strike me, you know, one was surprised that some countries had remained fairly low down and that others had sort of suddenly jumped up very quickly. And I think maybe we should perhaps be beginning to look at the way we approach budget reform initiatives in a slightly different way. I think in the past we've tended to look at them in a very technocratic way, with transparency being an outcome of the reforms. And perhaps it's actually trying to put the transparency issues and the related documentation, consultations around that much more up front in the process and the reforms, so that you've got something to drive the reforms. And I could see also that there is scope here that actually there's scope for getting better political engagement, because it is these are concepts which are perhaps easier to understand for the politicians than the more technocratic natures of budget management reforms. So I think there's scope here for really looking slightly differently at the way these issues have been addressed in the past by the donor agencies. I think looking forward, there are also a number of issues around how to and some of the constraints, and I think we should be wary of thinking that progress is always forward initiatives. I mean, I'm very struck by the problems countries actually have, and I think these are more logistical problems in making information public. And I think if you look at finance ministry websites, you can see good examples here. One year, the thing is brought sparklingly up to date, all the documentation is there, the score is high. Look the following year, and nothing new has been added. And there seem to be many examples of that. So there's a real need to just look at some of the nuts and bolts of the administrative support and management processes that are needed to actually maintain transparency. Also, looking at the 8 reports that the index is based upon, I think one has to be realistic about capacity constraints as well. And I take as my example particularly what I would call the 3 sort of analytical reports on the budget preparation side and monitoring side. Firstly, the pre-budget report. Secondly, the budget proposal, and thirdly, the mid-term review of implementation. Now, each of those involve quite a lot of policy analysis behind them, macroeconomic analysis, and these are often the areas where capacities are weakest. There can also be problems of actually trying to maintain the schedule in a situation where you've got a lot of fiscal and economic uncertainty. So the numbers are changing very radically. Certainly in one country where I worked recently, that had actually been a problem, that the finance ministry felt that because the framework had been updated between the pre-budget report and the actual presentation of the budget, it was really hard-pressed to explain why it was presenting one document 3 months before with significantly different figures from something when it actually came out with the budget proposal. So I think there are issues of capacity which maybe suggest that we should not be expecting countries necessarily to move forward on all fronts at the same time, or to look perhaps at ways in which some of these analytical functions and tasks can be combined. So perhaps the midterm, the mid-year review could actually be linked in with the pre-budget report in some cases. For example, if you were looking at, if you were saying, well, in order to look how we're going forward, we need to look at where we are now. So I think I'll stop there because that's too much. But I think again, just to say, it seems to me a tremendous initiative, and certainly hearty congratulations for everything that you've achieved with it.